Thanks for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Lori Johnson. Today, Israel finally moving into the last Hamas stronghold in the city of Rafah in Gaza after Hamas claimed to accept a ceasefire that Israel did not agree to. The war has hit parts of the Israeli economy hard, including agriculture. We'll show you how some Americans have stepped up to help Israeli farmers in need. The Bible tells us we should renew our minds, and we'll hear from an expert who explains how science can show us how to control our thoughts. And a gunman goes into a church in Pennsylvania and points a gun straight at the pastor. We'll show you what happened. Those stories and more today on Newswatch.
This is CBN Newswatch.
We begin in Israel, where after months of waiting, Israeli forces have begun their operation into Rafah, the last major Hamas stronghold in the Gaza Strip. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the operation began after negotiations broke down between Hamas and Israel.
Tuesday morning, Israeli forces captured the strategic Rafah border crossing between Egypt and the southern Gaza Strip. Israeli armored vehicles also reach the Philadelphia corridor, the location of many smuggling tunnels that bring in arms and ammunition for Hamas. The operation began after Hamas claimed to accept a ceasefire agreement, but Israel said it's not the proposal they offered.
It appears as if Hamas approved the deal that wasn't on the table and that they approved conditions that are convenient to them, but not to Israel.
Reportedly, one of those conditions included an end to the war, something Israel has never agreed to.
I think that what Hamas is trying to do is a classic textbook type of deception, where they want the headlines to be, Hamas approved the deal, Israel is refusing, and I think that's what they're aiming for. Hopefully, global media won't fall for that.
While Israel has agreed to continue negotiations in Cairo, its war cabinet unanimously voted to begin operations in Rafah.
At the same time, we continue our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
As the fighting around Rafah begins, some Gazans are fleeing the city to humanitarian safe zones set up by the IDF to get them out of harm's way.
Tonight, we also call upon those staying in specific areas, which we have communicated and defined through every means, radio, media, internet and flyers, in eastern Rafah to move towards the expanded humanitarian area in Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis, where they will receive full humanitarian aid and where water, food, medical equipment and shelter will be provided.
Former IDF spokesman Jonathan Conricus explains the challenges facing the IDF in Rafah.
First of all, the IDF has telegraphed its intentions for more than 4 months. So the enemy should be very well prepared and anticipating the attack. Second, densely populated urban terrain with an enemy that uses civilian infrastructure in order to fight from. So it's going to be as challenging as Gaza City and Khan Yunis, and perhaps even more.
Before the operation, this video surfaced of soldiers praying and blowing the shofar. Monday, President Biden warned Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu against a full-scale invasion of Rafah. In Washington today, President Biden will speak at the annual Holocaust Memorial Ceremony on Capitol Hill, citing the moral duty of people and nations to combat rising anti-Semitism. With threats against Jews spiking, the U.S. government is making an extra $400 million available to places like synagogues to increase their security. Just this past Saturday, 3 synagogues in New York City received bomb threats.
And Chris is with us now from Jerusalem. Chris, is Israel's goal still to wipe out Hamas in Gaza?
Yeah, it is, Lori. And in fact, they have had 3 goals since the beginning of the war. The number 1 is rescue all the hostages. Also, number 2, destroy Hamas after the October 7th, where 1,200 people were murdered, more than 200 taken hostage. And third, they want to assure that Gaza Strip will never threaten the people of Israel again. So those are the 3 goals. And so, yes, even though some people say what's happening right now in Rafah would be a limited campaign to be able to release some of the hostages, but the overall goal remains the same. And Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying for weeks now that that regardless of any deal or no deal, they will go into Rafah and they will destroy Hamas. The last remaining 4 battalions of Hamas remain there, and so that goal remains the same.
Are there any new developments between Hamas and Israel?
Well, Laurie, right now the Jerusalem Post is reporting that Hamas is going to free 33 hostages, and that would be women, female soldiers, children under 19, also adults above the age of 50, and those that are sick. The question remains, Laurie, is how many of these hostages are still alive and what condition they're in. We'll see how Israel responds, but things are unfolding rapidly. And obviously, with this incursion into Rafah and actually taking over these strategic places like the border crossing and the Philadelphia corridor, that Hamas will have to respond to this in some way. And perhaps this idea of releasing hostages is a way to stop this operation.
Well, what's been reported about some of the behind-the-scenes hostage ceasefire negotiations?
You know, Laurie, in the last day or so, it's been very confusing. First of all, Hamas rejected a deal that negotiators had been working on for days or weeks, but they refused it because their main objection is that it didn't end the war, and that's really a non-starter for Israel. Their goal is to defeat Hamas, and Hamas obviously wants to survive. But what happened? Axios reported that after Hamas rejected their first deal, that Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. developed a separate deal without the knowledge of Israel. And apparently, this was the second deal that Hamas accepted. Reportedly, Israel didn't even see that deal until 1 hour after Hamas had accepted it. And this was a whole different deal. And apparently one Israeli official said it really didn't look anything like the first one. And so Israeli officials, according to this report in Axios, feel they got played. And that's when, after that, the war cabinet unanimously decided to enter Rafah and begin this operation, at the same time sending negotiators to Cairo to continue the talks.
So, Chris, how rare is it for a military like the Israeli Defense Forces to warn civilians of an impending assault?
Well, actually, in the last several years, and certainly for this war, it's been common for the IDF to do that. I asked that question to Jonathan Conricus, who's the former IDF spokesman. He's been in the military for more than 20 years. Now he's out, and he's part of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. But he was saying it's very rare. Israel's done it since the beginning of the war. They've also done it through several wars with Hamas in 2008, 9, 12, 14, and 21. They often send leaflets, text messages, phone calls to tell Palestinians to get out of harm's way. And what this does as well, Laurie, it actually puts IDF soldiers at risk. And this is something I've heard from Israelis who object to this, and they don't want, certainly, their own soldiers to be at risk. But Israel does it for two reasons. Number one, they don't want to harm civilians, and that's why they want them out of harm's way. But also, they don't want Hamas to use these civilian casualties as propaganda in its media war. And so dead Palestinians actually serve, it's morbid to think of, Laurie, but it serves their purposes in a propaganda and the information battle.
Right, that's the way they work. Well, how strategic is the area known as the Philadelphia corridor, and what is it?
Well, it's the border between Egypt and Gaza. It's very strategic. It's a lifeline for Hamas. That's where you find dozens of smuggling tunnels. In fact, the IDF has already been discovering some of those tunnels. It brings in arms and ammunition to Hamas. If Israel can cut this off, it will go a long way to defeating Hamas. Complicating the situation is Egypt. It's been known for a long time that many Egyptian officers actually profit from these tunnels, but capturing that and controlling that will be key in the military campaign to defeat Hamas.
All right. Well, Chris, what's on your new episode of Jerusalem Dateline today?
Well, we'll have an update story. We have more analysis with Jonathan Conricus. We have a story on parents of soldiers who have been killed in Gaza who we met with them Saturday evening. They wanted the government to go into Gaza, so I would imagine today they're going to be excited about that prospect because they don't want their sons and daughters that died to die in vain. So they believe victory goes through Rafah. We also have a story on how Arab nations in the Middle East are reacting to Israel. An interview with Amir Sephardi. Many people know him about his book on the prophet Daniel. And finally, a story on counting the Omer between Pesach, Passover, and Shavuot, Pentecost.
Sounds really interesting. Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem, thanks as always for your insights. Stay safe and know that many people are praying for you and our staff there in Israel. And you can see the latest Jerusalem Dateline tonight on the CBN News channel at 8 o'clock Eastern. You can also watch on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Coming up, as Israeli farmers have been hit by the war against Hamas, we'll show you how some Americans have stepped up to help out. That story is coming up right after this.
Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
One specific group feeling the major impact from the war following the October 7th Hamas attacks, Israeli farmers. While locals have jumped in to help, it hasn't been enough. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, some American farmers have stepped up to the plow, bringing much-needed skills to the fields.
Here on Moshav Dekel near Gaza, war prevented farmers from harvesting this eggplant crop.
They should have been harvested in November, December, and there was no workers. So, in a very literal sense, in Israel, the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few.
We didn't have water for our crops, and in October it was very hot here. And then after the water came back, the workers leave. We used to have foreign workers from Thailand.
That's when author Doug Hershey stepped in to help by arranging trips for farmers to come here.
I have a company called Ezra Adventures that is a travel company for small groups, but in Hebrew, Ezra means help. When you have specific skills from the States that connect with specific needs in Israel and to be able to blend those, it's really been amazing.
Aner Agiv, a farmer here, is also head of security.
It's incredible that guys from another country decide to come here with on their own money and on their own spare time. They're also farmers as us. It's beautiful.
These volunteers behind me are picking strawberries less than 2 miles from the Gaza border. If they weren't here helping out, these strawberries wouldn't likely go to market.
We heard that there was a big need in this area since a lot of the farmers were called into the reserves and military, that a lot of the crops were going unharvested.
This is Katie Schertzer's first time in Israel.
Picking strawberries at home, we would be picking them down on the ground and not up in the air. So this is very cool to see. The people here are fantastic. Even though they're going through war right now, they're so giving at the same time.
Kelly Zimmerman, another first-timer, says she came to link arms and give support.
I think there's no better way than to show up in person, and we've experienced that. It means a lot to people here, and so it's been a beautiful thing so far.
But you came during a war. Were you afraid?
No. I love adventure.
What are you going to tell people when you go home?
Come to Israel. Experience it for yourself.
Bella, who owns the strawberry greenhouses, says without volunteers, she wouldn't have had a crop or income.
The volunteers did so much. I don't have enough words to thank them for what they did.
Danny, whose identity is hidden for security reasons, says for the last 6 months, this area has felt frozen in time, but the volunteers are helping bring it back to life.
So what do you think about these volunteers?
Oof, it's amazing. It's amazing. After the 7th of October, after the few months, it's hard for us to push. And these people come, with big heart to help us,
Pennsylvania farmers John Kreider and Jim Schertzer are helping Danny.
We're all farmers. We love working hard. We love the agriculture. We love working with farmers, the whole atmosphere. So it's just a chance to serve at what we're good at.
This morning we were cutting down trees that are around a water source that he is going to be using for expansion of his fields.
And their message when they go home:
just that they're good people. They've suffered a lot, but they're resilient and they're forging ahead. But they needed help.
It's a great country. Not to be cliche, but it's flowing with milk and honey. It's amazing to see green fields in the middle of the desert.
Hershey says they're stepping into the pages of the Bible to fulfill prophecy.
Isaiah 61 talks about strangers and foreigners coming to help, but not just help, working in the fields, tending the vineyards, and that's exactly what we've been doing.
He encourages others to step up and help.
There are tremendous needs here in this land. Israel is heartbroken. They are still grieving the losses of friends. They're still trying to figure out families that are scattered all over the place. This is the time to support Israel. You can support by prayer. You can support by financially giving. And there are opportunities, whether it's with groups with mine, with Ezra Adventures, or other opportunities. There are opportunities to come and help, to actually be involved.
He says it also honors the covenant God made with the Jewish people forever.
For Christians, if they've enjoyed their Jewish Bible and their Jewish Messiah, they've enjoyed the spiritual blessings of Israel, and Christians owe a debt according to Romans 15. And the way you repay that debt is to minister to Israel and to serve Israel with material needs. If there's ever been a time to do that, it's right now.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Moshav Dekel, Southern Israel.
The Apostle Paul wrote that we should renew our minds, and we'll hear from an expert about how science can help us control our thoughts right after this. The Bible tells us we should control our thoughts and renew our minds. Well, many of us find that very challenging. On this week's Healthy Living, addiction specialist Dr. Alan Weissenbacher, author of the Brain Change Program, talks about the concept of neuroplasticity as a starting point.
Based upon what you choose and what you think about, and the way I would describe it to my addicts in recovery is that their brain consists of superhighways or little paths. The superhighways are those paths that you use the most often, and they've become the strongest. And for a particular individual, that might be anger, that might be lust, that might be alcohol. Whatever they have been doing a lot of, that creates the superhighway. And so whenever life throws you a curveball or you feel stressed, the brain wants to take the biggest highway, and that could be the alcohol. And so it's going to take a lot of work to switch to a little path of sobriety that's unused, small. But I tell people the encouraging thing is every time you actively move your brain from this highway of, say, alcohol to the small path, you take one brick off the highway and put it on the path. You might need to do this 60 times a minute to start. But every time you move a brick, then you might only have to do it 30 times, then maybe only once every 5 minutes. It gets easier as you do this brain construction project, dismantling the big stuff and building up the small stuff so that it becomes big and the replacement.
When you look at the addicts that you have counseled over the years, what do the winners choose and what do the people who never break their addictions, what's the difference?
At the core of it is to get at what is the root issue that is causing the addiction. Whatever pain, whatever difficulties, whatever worries, anxieties, whatever past experiences or trauma is down deep, that's the root, and then the addiction is the weed, the leaves. You can try to pick the leaves, but it'll still keep growing back. And so really need to bring that deep pain, whatever it is, out into the light for healing. So do that first, work on that healing, and then the habits in the brain. The brain wants to take its path, the big pathways. And as you're getting healed, then begin to dismantle the automatic behaviors. Forget willpower. Willpower doesn't work. I tell a client, if you're sitting there thinking, must not use alcohol, what are you thinking about? Alcohol. And what pathway in your brain is getting stronger? The alcohol. And so you're making it worse for yourself in the very act of saying, don't do it, don't do it. And so I tell people what you need to do is don't resist using willpower, instead replace. Focus on something good, focus on something beneficial. If you're starting to feel some kind of craving, don't try to must not. Get yourself involved in something good. We would take addicts to Juarez, Mexico to work on building orphanages. People are saying, are you crazy? You're taking addicts to that area? And we never had a problem. Why? Because they were focused on building that orphanage. They were doing good.
You can hear more about the specific steps we need to take in order to change the way we think on this week's edition of Healthy Living today on the CBN News Channel at 2:30 and 6:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Coming up, a man comes into a church Sunday and points a gun straight at the pastor. We'll tell you what happened next when we come back. A Pennsylvania pastor says he's grateful to God for his life after facing a man with a drawn gun during his Sunday sermon. Pastor Glenn Germany was preaching when a man walked up, pointed a gun at him, and allegedly pulled the trigger. When the gun jammed, a quick-acting church deacon tackled him from behind. It was all captured on the church's live stream. The pastor said he never saw the gunman before Sunday. He now faces attempted murder charges. The incident happened at Jesus' Dwelling Place Church in North Braddock, Pittsburgh. Well, that's it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing CBN Newswatch at cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.